I watched the ICU monitor as the patient I was told to let die suddenly opened his eyes and whispered for help, unaware that the doctor standing behind me was already preparing to silence us both forever. Now, I'm being hunted by a man who controls a deadly organized scheme, and the only thing standing between me and an immense prison sentence for a crime I didn't commit is the truth I uncovered in the dark of night. The fluorescent lights of the ICU have a way of humming that burrows directly into your skull. By 3 a.m., the sound becomes a physical weight. I've been a nurse for 12 years, and I thought I had seen the full spectrum of human fragility. I've held hands through the final rattle of breath and adjusted IV drips for patients who were practically miracles in progress. But nothing prepared me for the man in room 402. He was listed as John Doe, a victim of a hit-and-run found on the outskirts of the industrial district. He'd been in a coma for 3 weeks. His charts were a grim testament to the inevitable. Multi-organ failure, zero brain activity, a heart kept fluttering only by the rhythmic, mechanical hiss of the ventilator. Every day the charts were signed off with a definitive "do not resuscitate" order, approved by his primary physician, Dr. Eris Thorne. Dr. Thorne was the hospital's golden boy, charismatic, wealthy, and seemingly allergic to failure. He had been the one to authorize the comfort care measures, the one who looked at the grieving, non-existent family with eyes that radiated a professional, practiced sympathy. I was finishing my rounds, checking the telemetry monitors, when I passed by room 402. The room was dark, save for the blue-white glow of the screens. I stopped. My brain, wired for patterns, caught a flicker of movement that didn't belong. The ventilator display, the one that had been flatlining on manual override for days, was showing a slight, rhythmic irregularity. I stepped inside, my heart thumping against my ribs. I walked to the bedside, expecting to find a malfunctioning sensor. I leaned in, my stethoscope pressed against his chest. I didn't just hear it, I felt it. A soft, wet, ragged sound of an intake of air. He was breathing, spontaneously. I pulled back, my hands trembling. The ventilator was barely doing the work. His diaphragm was moving. I checked his pupils. They were sluggish, but they reacted to the pen light. He wasn't just there. He was fighting to come back. I immediately grabbed the intercom and called the on-call station, requesting Dr. Thorne's presence in room 402. Thorne arrived 10 minutes later, looking impeccably groomed even at that ungodly hour. He walked in with his hands in his pockets, his demeanor casual until he saw me hovering over the patient. "Nurse, what is the meaning of this intrusion?" he asked, his voice low and sharp. "Doctor, look at the vitals," I whispered, pointing to the monitor. "He's breathing on his own. His neurological responses are coming back. He's waking up." Thorne didn't look at the monitor. He looked at me. His expression didn't shift into surprise or professional relief. Instead, his face went perfectly, terrifyingly blank. He walked past me, leaned over the patient, and checked the man's eyes. When he turned back, his gaze was ice cold. "He is terminal, nurse," Thorne said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You are exhausted, and you are seeing things that aren't there. We are withdrawing support in an hour. Do not touch him again." "But he's alive," I insisted, my voice rising. "I can see the data." Thorne reached out and grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "Go to the break room. Sit down. If I hear one word about this miracle to anyone, the staff, the administration, or, God forbid, the media, you will find yourself facing a fabricated attempt to break your life with a heavy legal accusation regarding patient malpractice. Do you understand? I am the head of this department. Your career, your license, and your future are hanging by a thread." I stood there, paralyzed, while he turned back to the bed. As I retreated into the hallway, I heard a faint, frantic tapping. I stopped and turned. The patient's hand was twitching, weakly brushing against the metal railing of the bed. Then his eyes snapped open. He looked directly at me, his gaze filled with a primal, suffocating terror, and he mouthed a single word: "Help." Just as I took a step toward him, I felt a hand shove me hard into the wall. I looked up to see the hospital security guard standing there, his face unreadable, holding a folder with my termination notice. "Clear out your locker," he said. "You're done." The security guard's grip on my shoulder was like a vice, forcing me toward the locker room while the world blurred in a haze of adrenaline and confusion. "You're done," he repeated, his voice devoid of any empathy, sounding more like a recording than a person. I tried to pull away, to shout that there was a man dying in 402, a man who was fighting to wake up, but the guard shoved me again, harder. I hit the tiled wall, the cold surface biting into my shoulder, and realized with a sickening jolt that this wasn't just a sudden firing, this was an extraction. I managed to grab my bag from my locker, my hands shaking so violently I dropped my keys. As I scrambled to pick them up, I saw the reflection of the hallway in the locker mirror. Dr. Thorne was walking toward the pharmacy, accompanied by two men in suits who definitely didn't look like hospital staff. They moved with a calculated, militaristic efficiency. They weren't doctors. They were enforcers. "You need to leave now," the security guard hissed, leaning in close enough that I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Whatever you think you saw, bury it. If you step back into this building, or if you even whisper a word to the authorities, they won't just take your license. They'll implicate you in an organized scheme involving the hospital's black market pharmaceutical logs. You'll be looking at decades in a cell for a crime you didn't even commit. Do you hear me?" I didn't answer. I bolted. I didn't stop until I reached my car in the far corner of the parking lot, the asphalt slick with a cold midnight mist. I sat in the driver's seat, my chest heaving, listening to the silence of the night. Why would the head of the ICU kill a patient? Why would he go to such extreme lengths to silence a nurse? I thought about the man in 402. The way he looked at me, it wasn't just fear, it was recognition. I started the engine, my mind racing. I couldn't just leave him. I pulled out my phone and dialed the police, but my fingers froze over the call button. The guard's warning echoed in my head. Organized scheme. If Thorne was as powerful as he seemed, and if he had people in suits handling his dirty work, then the local police might already be on his payroll. I needed evidence. I needed to know who John Doe really was. I drove home in a daze, the streetlights flickering like strobes. My apartment felt like a tomb. I logged onto the hospital's secure patient portal using my administrator credentials, the ones they hadn't revoked yet. I searched for room 402's intake logs, but the record was gone. Not deleted, but encrypted behind a high-level firewall I'd never seen before. I dug deeper, bypassing the main interface, digging into the digital paper trail of the ambulance that brought him in. There was a discrepancy. The GPS coordinates for the pickup location were scrubbed, but I managed to recover a metadata file from the transit camera. I opened the grainy, pixelated file. It showed a desolate stretch of road near the city's shipping yards. In the background of the shot, a black SUV was pulling away, its license plates deliberately obscured. But it wasn't the car that caught my eye. It was the figure standing near the trunk. He was holding a heavy bag, and as he turned, the streetlight caught his profile. My stomach dropped. It was Dr. Thorne. He wasn't just treating the patient, He was the one who had dumped him there. Suddenly, a notification pinged on my laptop. A remote access prompt. Someone was inside my server. My screen flickered and a single line of text appeared in a chat box that had opened on its own. You should have kept your eyes on the monitor, not the patient. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart hammering. I grabbed my jacket and sprinted to the kitchen, intending to get out, but I stopped dead in my tracks. Through the window, I saw 2 sets of headlights pulling into my driveway. They didn't park, they blocked the exit. As the car doors opened, the harsh beam of a high-powered flashlight cut through the darkness and landed directly on my living room window. I wasn't just being watched. I was being hunted. I backed away, but the front door lock began to click, a steady, rhythmic sound that meant my sanctuary was gone. The door handle turned, and as it swung open, I saw the barrel of a weapon silhouetted against the porch light. I didn't wait for them to cross the threshold. I scrambled toward the back utility room, my breath coming in jagged, painful gasps. The floorboards creaked, an agonizing sound in the sudden, suffocating silence of my apartment. I didn't have a weapon, but I had the one thing they didn't account for, the truth about the hospital's internal server. Before I had closed my laptop, I'd managed to initiate a sync to an external encrypted cloud drive, a digital insurance policy that would trigger an automatic transmission to the regional bureau of the service for internal investigations if I didn't enter a code every hour. The door burst open, heavy boots thumping against the hardwood. "Search the perimeter," a voice growled. The same voice that had been so calm in the ICU, the voice of Dr. Thorne. He wasn't just directing his goons, he was leading them. I pressed my back against the cold dryer, clutching my phone. I saw a shadow loom across the hallway. I realized then that there was nowhere to run, but there was nowhere for them to hide either. I had left the laptop open in the kitchen, and it was currently broadcasting my exact GPS coordinates to the agency I had pinged minutes ago. As Thorne rounded the corner, he stopped. He looked at me, not with the cold calculation of before, but with a frantic, unhinged desperation. "You don't understand the scale of what you've stepped into," he hissed, his pristine white coat now wrinkled and stained with the night's work. That man wasn't just a patient. He was a courier for a massive organized scheme, carrying packages with substances that would bring this entire city to its knees. If he wakes up, he testifies. If he dies, we bury the secret. You were supposed to be a non-factor, a quiet cog in the machine. "You're a doctor, Thorne," I whispered, my voice trembling but finding a core of iron. "You took an oath. You're nothing but a coward covering up for a network of criminals." Thorne raised the weapon he was holding. It looked heavy, military grade. But before he could level it at me, the quiet of the night was shattered. A series of deafening, synchronized crashes echoed through the front of the house. Blue and red lights pulsed violently against my bedroom windows, reflecting off the walls like a strobe light from hell. The Internal Security Agency had arrived, and they hadn't come for a conversation. "Drop the illegal weapon!" a voice thundered from the hallway. Thorne froze, his face drained of color, the arrogance finally melting into the raw fear of a man realizing his reign was over. He looked at the window, then at me, then at the agents pouring into the room like a tidal wave of tactical gear. He didn't even try to run. He dropped the weapon with a clatter that sounded like a funeral bell. The next few hours were a blur of handcuffs, blinding floodlights, and endless statements. I sat on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a thermal blanket, watching as Thorne was led away in tight steel shackles. An agent, A woman with a sharp, no-nonsense gaze walked over to me. She handed me a cup of coffee and a thick file. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "The John Doe in room 402 is stable. He's already started talking. Because of your quick thinking, the entire organized network connected to this hospital has been dismantled. You saved his life, and you saved a lot more people than you'll ever know." 6 months later, I walked down the quiet halls of a different facility, one that smelled of antiseptic and hope. I wasn't an ICU nurse anymore. I was working in patient advocacy, helping those who had been silenced by the powerful. The trauma of that night had left its marks, but it had also given me a purpose I never had before. I kept a small framed photo on my desk, not of the hospital, but of a sunrise I'd seen the morning after everything fell apart. Thorne had been handed an immense sentence, a consequence of the evidence I'd secured that exposed the illicit trade routes he'd been running through the morgue and the pharmacy. He would spend the next several decades behind bars, far away from any patient he could ever harm again. As I watched a young patient laugh with their family down the hall, I realized the humming in my ears was gone. The weight was lifted. I wasn't just a nurse anymore. I was a survivor. And for the first time in my life, I could finally breathe on my own.